Hello everyone, my name is Marina and this is my video blog. Welcome! As I have promised you in my video blog, I would like to talk to you about people, places and ideas. My previous video was about Shenzhen Civic Center, so that stands for the places part. In the future, I hope we will get the chance to meet many interesting people, and today I would like to talk to you about some of my ideas. And since usually I like to pick up the ideas of philosophical and psychological nature, ideas full of mystery and puzzles, ideas that are highly bothering human mind and that are hardly being answered by human minds, so I thought that it would be honest to address all of those discussions and questions to someone who, first of all, has generated all of them, and secondly, potentially might have answers to them. And this someone is no one else but God, or in another way of perspective, the universe. So I would like to start with you our discussions with God and the universe. And the first topic of our discussions I would like to dedicate to the origins and structure of human personalities. Thinking a lot about how personality of human is being formed, the analogy of a soup bowl seems to me to be the most precise one. Each bowl of soup has different ingredients that vary by taste, quality, and their ratios towards each other. In a similar way, personality of each human has different psychological characteristics that also vary by their qualities and their ratios towards each other. In a similar way, we would say that tasty, delicious ingredients of a soup stand for the positive characteristics of human personality. Meanwhile, ingredients bad in flavor go for the negative characteristics. Quality of those ingredients equals to the level of complexity of person's psychological traits, and the ratio of those ingredients equal to the proportional combination of those traits coexisting within each particular person. In such way, none of us is a pure goodness or pure evil. More or less, we are just different combinations and different variations of our psychological features. And the cases of severe criminals or angel-like volunteers are just the extremes of these proportional distributions of the psychological components within each personality's soup bowl. One more thing to be mentioned here is that the big picture of soup blend isn't the same throughout the lifetime of each person. More or less, but people do change. Their personalities are fluid, and the soup ingredients also fluctuate. And here come some interesting questions. How the coefficients of those psychological elements are being formed, and based on what factors those coefficients change throughout one's lifetime. So here I've done my best to classify the groups of factors that affect the regions of human's personality. In total, there are 4 groups. The first groups are the natural factors. I have split them in 2 categories, genes and chemistry. It is a common sense that genes do affect the personality of a human, since even newborns react differently on the same conditions. For example, from the personal experience, while just being a few years old, I didn't like much being tightly covered by the blanket, and I was doing my best to loosen it, and only after it was loosened up, I was able to relax and fall asleep peacefully. And maybe one more example of me being a few years old and attending kindergarten and walking around my kindergarten peers and promoting highly my kind of truth to them. So this way, the resistance to discomfort and independent attempts to fix it, as well as promotion of life revelations. This is some psychological features that were inherited by me by genes, since it doesn't seem that any circumstantial or environmental factors would affect my behavior to be this way at such early stages of my development. The second category, chemistry of our bodies. I mean numerous hormones, minerals, vitamins, chemical elements, and substances that our bodies, and particularly our brains, are made of and affected by. And the most evidential example here would be the way different chemical substances bring people to addictions and affect their personalities. Though, of course, I do not mean here that chemistry affects only addicted people. Each of us is literally a chemical cocktail, and such things as physical exercises, change of a diet, medical prescription, hormonal splash, change of emotions, all of that is potentially able to significantly change our mood and even the worldview perception. And the second group of factors that affect the human's personality are environmental ones. Here there are two main categories: environment in its broad sense and environment in its narrow sense. And now let's start talking about the environment in its broad sense. Environment in its broad sense also has four subsections. It's country, culture, religion, and geography. So, country. People of the same country share the same social, political, and economic background and ideological settings. And though they might even generate different kind of responses towards those settings, right? But the settings, like the decorations of their social and economic and political and ideological existence, are kind of the same. Culture. I remember when I was in university, I had such a subject as culturology, and in the first class, my professor asked me and my friends to prepare the homework, the definition of culturology, and we saw of culture, the definition of culture, sorry, to be precise, yeah. And me and my classmates, my group mates, we saw that, such an easy homework, easy peasy lemon squeezy, huh? But then the professor mentioned that there are more than 500 of definitions of what culture is. So after that, that task didn't seem to be the same easy one, because choosing the exactly and appropriately matching definition of what culture is actually a challenging task. So here, while talking about culture, mainly I'm referring to its ethnical dimension of customs and traditions that penetrate the mind of every human since childhood in the form of fairy tales, cartoons, movies, songs, holiday celebrations, and even food. And as a result has a huge cultural impact on humans' personality. Next one is religion. Religion is definitely one of the most contradictory and complicated factors of influence. And I would say that the way the person forms the attitude towards religion could be even a good litmus test of the person's overall intellectual development. And I think it goes without saying the strengths and the depths to which religion might affect humans' personality, as in the particular case of one individual, as social phenomenon for the society in general. Geography. This is perhaps not the most evidential, however, to my opinion, very solid factor of influence. If to look deeply, it will become very clear that people of different geographical settings, they have different psychological traits, and different climate and landscape settings affect people in the different manners. So the simplest analogy that comes to my mind is that people from the hot climate, they seem to be more relaxed and their life intensity is much slower, and they're more like peaceful and harmonical. Meanwhile, the people from the cold areas are very dynamic, very strong, serious, and with a high intensity of life. But surely this is a very broad generalization, and there would be more distinctions between people of the hot climate zones but with deserted areas and hot climate zones but with tropical rainforests. Still, I believe that geography is a solid factor of influence over human psyche. It is just more research and more specification is necessary to be done to make the frame of geography connection, correlation, let's say, to the personality development more evidential. And now let's talk about the second category of environment, which is environment in its narrow sense. Our closest environment consists of family and friends. These are our first social circles that have the greatest impact on our mental and psychological development. These first social networks have very direct and very frequent feedback on all of our thoughts, emotions, actions, and behaviors. And if the broad environment affects us in one way direction, from country, culture, religion, and geography towards our mentality and psyche, so our family and friends coexist with us in the dimension of very intensive two-way interactions. As we know, scientists learn about the laws of nature from the series of tests and experiments. In a similar way, our mentality learns about the laws of social nature through the series of social tests and experiments. And if natural scientists might be able to stay completely neutral towards the results of the experiments that they receive, so our psyche gets very vulnerable and gets very affected and gets adjusted by the results of the social experiments that it receives. In a way, we could say that our psyche and our personality is in a way a scientist who is at the same time and the designer of the experiment and the active participant of it. And for this very reason, it is really hard to overestimate the strength of the impact that family and friends have over the formation of our personalities. At this point, it should be mentioned that though the power of influence that our family circles and our friend circles doing over our formation are undeniably strong, at the same time, they are very different in their essence and their nature. And the key criterion that makes them so distinctive is a matter of choice. We do not choose our families, and we do choose our friends. Perhaps nothing more in this world can speak more in favor of the argument that fate exists as much as family does. Family that we are born in is our fate. And this fate is not simply circumstantial, it's very deeply emotional and subconscious. It's not only the relationships with our family members that we develop and maintain throughout the lifetime, but also their characters, their attitudes towards us, and our attitudes towards them affect our psyche in very deep, in very integral level and form our self-identity both consciously and subconsciously. And the situation with friends is very different. From the great amount of people that we meet on our life way, we pick up as friends at least those, the mentality of which ones rhymes with us the most. Maybe we are similar in the same values and manners, or maybe it's exactly the contradictory nature of our characters that's what we find a special joy in one way and another. But finding a friend, choosing a friend, this is one of the first practices of a free will made by a human. Moreover, we can have friendships only with those who also have chosen us back. This is very mutual connection, and that's what exactly makes it so precious, so beautiful and lovely. Surely, if someone is lucky to combine successfully the family and friendship connections among the same people, well, then we should just send the best congratulations to those lucky ones who have won the golden tickets of life. The next profound aspect of influence over the personality formation stands for the education and the general informational field that surrounds a person. Education is very complex and multidimensional structure, so in the attempt to make it at least a little bit more simple, let's look at it this way. First of all, education is a certain amount of knowledge. And secondly, education is also a set of skills and techniques with the help of which ones this knowledge can be obtained. Of course, it goes without saying that quality and the complexity of education defines a lot the speed and the level of person's intellectual development. In addition to this, education is very important from the aspect of being a social network that constructs our skills of negotiation with the society, in the horizontal dimension with our peers, such as classmates, and in the vertical direction with the authorities, such as teachers. At the same time, education is not the only source of informational invasion into one's mind. Internet, social media, mass media, art, science, literature, all of these informational channels play a great role in the way the worldview lens of a human is being adjusted. After the comprehensive review of three categories of factors of influence over the personality's formation, here we come to the fourth one. In my opinion, the most important one. I would call it as self-influence. This factor is the ultimate beauty of humans as the most conscious creatures known so far. Consciousness, that's what makes humans so much different from any other living creatures. Consciousness, that is also that can make humans very different from what they originally intended to be. Actually, what I mean here is that humans have two different ways of development. First one is to develop simply in the accordance with the initial factors of influence. Basically speaking, to stay the product of the environment, society, biology, and education. The second way of development implies that at a certain moment in a lifetime, human would reach her or his peak of development based on outer factors of influence. Stop, breathe, look back at all the way that was done before, contemplate it, reflect on it, and then design her or his own paradigm, absolutely conscious paradigm of development. Sometimes in the psychological and philosophical literature, these processes are being called as an awakening or exercise of free will. Unfortunately, it should be said that not all people experience in their lifetime that moment. Not all people ever come to the moment of acknowledgement, to the moment of awakening and free will. I would even say that this exact moment can easily split the Homo sapiens species of all of the humans in the world right now into two absolutely new categories. The ones that are awakened and that actively manifesting their free will, and the ones who are not. It is logical to assume that awakened and active species are likely to transfer the concept of self-influence towards their following generations, and non-awakened and passive subspecies are likely to transfer just the outer factors of influence towards their next generations. At the same time, the ultimate beauty of human subconsciousness is exactly in the fact that it allows human creatures to move from one subspecies type to another one within the life period of one particular individual. And here we come to the next stage of our story, in which all of the focus will go to the factors, to the reasons, and to the exact moment in a human's lifetime that will cause the transition from one subspecies type towards another one, from being non-awakened and passive towards becoming awakened and active. Most of the times, humans' awakening is caused by very powerful events in one's lifetime, such as loss of a dear person, or geographical relocation, or crash of an ideology, country, or political regime, or personal life failure, or career failure, or shift between milestones of life, such as graduation, marriage, birth of children, children leaving home, getting retired, and so on. As you might have noticed, most of these events are very sad and dramatic. Well, it's a common notion that sadness and pain are very efficient accelerators of humans' growth and development. Though it should be said that not always pain leads to the awakening, as actually not always awakening leads to the exercise of free will. Sometimes sorrow just digests the personality, making humans to give up and get lost in the ocean of fears and pain. And sometimes awakening leads to an internal loop of reflections, doubts, and hesitation. But sometimes humans do find inner strength to rise from their ashes. Perhaps this is one of those most beautiful things about humans, that is turning down from animals to gods. It's exactly their ability to find strength, hope, and direction for a change in the middle of the personal ruins. So what about the exact moment in the lifetime when the concept of self-influence strikes the human's mind? As we have mentioned before, some of the people unfortunately never experience it. But those who do, when does it happen to them? And does it even matter? To my opinion, it does, and is highly connected to hope. In most of the cases, people discover their self-influence abilities in their 30s or 40s. These ages are already more conscious and honestly sober than teenagers or even 20s. Usually in the mass mind, this process is being labeled as Middle Ages crisis. I think it's also due to the fact that most of the times, exactly in 30s and 40s, most of those dramatic and powerful events that we have mentioned before happen to people. Of course, sometimes it also can happen to a person in his teenagers or even 20s. Well, those probably would be the cases of very attentive and very intellectual prodigy mind. And separately here should be mentioned the moment when such self-influence relations happen to people in their 50s, 60s, 70s, or later ages of life. There is such a saying that it's better later than never, and I'm really curious if in such situation it also would work this way. Is it really good for a person to get awakened in the moment of the sunset of her or his life? Since, as we have concluded, transformation to consciousness tend to be a painful process and most of the times might look like a dark tunnel. So every dark tunnel needs a light in the end of it, right? Usually the role of light is being played by hope. Hope and faith in the better tomorrow, in the update that is leading to an uplifting life change. That's what can be good salvation and good compensation for all of the pain that human has been through. So if you are young, the period of the past to which some pain and disappointment might relate is somehow short, and there is still plenty of future times full of opportunities and possible scenarios. And an overall balance of the things might still look quite optimistic. But what if you are not young anymore? What if the past is the most massive time period of your life and it's much longer than any logical estimation of the future? In general, the understanding that your life is already at 90% load is quite dramatic and deserves a separate discussion. Assuming the most positive scenario in such situation would be happy, satisfied, and full of joy memories of the previous life. But what if you have disappointed in life? Would you still seek for a change in such situation? Or would you just consciously delude yourself for the sake of the pain-free existence? Maybe exactly this pattern of logic makes elder people more conservative and less open to everything new, particularly to new hopes. This way, it would be reasonable to say that the earlier people discovered the power of their self-influence and free wills, the more promising, optimistic, and pain-free these processes would be. And now let's come to the overview of everything that was said before. Maybe those of you who are strong, patient, and intellectual enough to arrive with me to this very moment of video ask themselves why in general she decided to talk about all of those things. Well, the answer on that is the following one. All of this analysis of the way the personality of a human has been formed is made by me due to the attempt to answer all those numerous questions that are puzzling my mind, and I'm sure have been puzzling the minds of lots of people throughout centuries or even thousands of years. There are lots of those questions, hundreds and thousands, but let's today talk about some of them. So here is the first group of questions. So in the first group we have questions about the possibility of humans to change. Can human personalities change? And if yes, to what extent? And if no, then what is caging the changes of their personalities? Remember the analogy of a soup bowl? So how many of psychological ingredients are we able to replace within one personality? Is it just a few? So the overall result will be just slightly adjusted in taste, maybe more delicious, but still approximately similar dish? Or are we able completely to recook the soup in a way that its taste would not resemble even a little bit the initial mixture? So in case if human all in all is committed to perform a major change over her or his personality, is it even a feasible goal? Can we really redefine who we are and design our new selves according to our new preferences and our new visions of perfect selves? And how do we form that new perspective of whom we wish to be? How much can we be sure that that updated vision of perfect self is truest and not biased? Or are we just running away from the inner real selves, from our default mode, just constantly battling with those cores that make us who we are? And maybe the best what we can achieve in such situation are just some slight adjustments and tunings. The second group of questions speak about the influences from outside. How much outer influences decide who we are? How much freedom can we gain from those influences? Let's say, if I was born in a different part of the world, with different pre-settings of my existence, and grew up in a completely different environment, how much still of actual me would stay within my psyche? Or would I be a completely different person without a slightest resemblance to the current version of me? Can I, by recognizing and acknowledging all of those outer experiences that have affected my personality, peel them off and find the sheer course of who I truly am? In case if they exist for sure. Do they? The third group of questions addresses the influences that we make over other personalities. How much are we responsible for the changes that we cause in the people that we meet throughout our lifetime, willingly or unwillingly, consciously or subconsciously? Are we able to change the negativity, those psychological ingredients, bad in flavor, that we see in people surrounding us? And should we? Is society able to change people whose characters are absorbed by negativity and cruel actions? Is there any universal concept or system of values and attitudes that would allow us to grow up any new coming baby in a way that after 20 years we would have the world consistent from people who are healthy-minded, spiritually beautiful, adequate, and absolutely conscious, who would live in the harmony with themselves and with the world surrounding them? How should we calculate the accurate formula of attitudes towards people whose bowl of soup is very controversial, who strangely combine within their characters the most gentle and caring and at the same time the most cruel and terrifying traits and actions? Should their negativity being forgiven for the sake of valuing and appreciating their good virtues? Or should their good deeds be forgotten for the sake of the justified punishment over their wrongdoings? If for a moment we imagine that we have a code to God's mind, which value would God appreciate more, mercy or justice? And the fourth group of questions dives into the philosophy of human's nature. Where does evilness come from? If each of us experiences some negative thoughts, why some of us are able to cope up with them and tackle them down, not letting them to affect our personalities, our characters, and our actions, and others, in the greater or smaller extent, fail to negativity, letting it to digest their minds and hearts, and leading them to the actions full of hatred and violence? And those who all in all fail to negativity, are they just unlucky victims of negative influence from the side of nature, environment, society, lack of education, things like that? Or they are conscious evil characters? Or just cowards who fail to resist to the negative surroundings? Why some people, even after acknowledging the strongest power of outer influences, would still prefer consciously obey to them and absolutely give up all of their freedoms and powers of free will? What is that exact psychological component that makes the personality of some people weak and some people strong? I'm not really sure if humankind in general, and me in particular, would ever be able to find the accurate answers on all of these questions. But at least I will keep on trying. So in my following videos, I plan to have discussions over all of these questions and questions of similar nature. So if you are interested into such kind of mental elaborations, then you are welcome to join. And in case if by any chance you would have any kind of answers on those questions, wow, I would be really happy if you could share them with me. So I hope to see you soon. Until next time, bye bye.